welcome to the OnStage Colorado podcast. Once again, I'm Alex Miller.
And I'm Tony Tresca.
So this is one of our bonus episodes, we call them. So no headliners this week or like a big main topic, but we do have a great interview with sound engineer Jason Ducat here in a little bit, which we were kind of on hold there for a little while, but he's going to be here today. And also some news to take a look at and a few shows to talk about. So what's going on, Tony?
Yeah, so I'd say let's just start with the shows we've seen since our last episode. Why not kick it off with Eureka Day over at Curious Theater, which you and I both attended last Thursday.
Yeah, and you did a review about it, and pretty much strong review, although you picked out a few things about the play itself that you weren't thrilled with. Do you want to enumerate those at all?
Sure. So Eureka Day is a vaccine comedy. I guess that's another another name for the CDC as well right now. Vaccine comedy.
Right.
All their panels have been crazy, and it's definitely interesting to be watching a show about vaccines that's set in 2018. In 2025, as like so much real world noise and news is being taken up by RFK Jr. And
oh my God,
a lot of the anti-vaxxers.
Can hardly be more timely, right?
Absolutely. That's kind of where I start my review with, was like grappling with the measles vaccine not being recommended anymore, along with further just doubling down on the CDC statement against the COVID vaccine, as I was like, yeah, it definitely feels like a timely time to be staging a play about vaccines. And it's set in 2018 in Berkeley at a private school that's on its face very liberal facing. And we're kind of following this executive committee who rules, as we learn, by consensus. This has just kind of been the way it always is. And it's the opening scene kind of starts. I thought it was kind of slow, actually. It's kind of a long, extended scene about this admission application, and what race option should be included in a drop-down box.
The menu,
yeah. It goes on for a long time, and then there's this.
It sets the tone for like what goes on in their meetings, but yeah, it probably could have been trimmed just a little bit. But I mean, it also introduces these characters, and this show has a lot of really great actors in it that people that I always look forward to seeing on stage, like Eric Sandvold and Christina Fontaine and Karen Slack. So yeah, a couple of big heavy hitters there.
And those were my three favorite performances of the evening. All of those are Curious Artistic Company members. Karen Slack is playing this kind of anti-vaxxer named Susan. She has had a contentious past with vaccines in her mind and with her own children, and so the stakes are very personal to her. Karen, as usual, she gives a really emotionally searing performance. You feel really bad for her character by the end, despite how her actions are affecting everybody else. You get where she's coming from, even if you're just like, I wish you wouldn't.
Yep.
And Eric Sandoval is playing this kind of affable deal-making principal who is heading the committee. He's always there to kind of like politic and smooth things over. He's always trying to get to the next point. There's a really funny line where he's musing about when he retires, maybe he'll become a mime. And then Karen Slack's character is like, I've never heard you not talk for more than 2 minutes.
Yeah.
And it's a very, very believable dynamic that he creates as this principal who is just trying to hold it all together as a outbreak happens in this school, and thus pits the members of the executive committee against each other.
Yep. And it has one really, really great scene sort of midway. There's no intermission, but it's a town hall where they're in the room in the school library, which is a really great set built by Marcus Henry. And so overhead, they're projecting the stream of the parents that are weighing in online, which turns into just a shit show, which is very funny.
Yeah, I called that the high point of the piece in my review. It's really hilarious. The audience when we were in attendance was just laughing so hard at points by the comments that were coming in on the screen that it literally drowned out the discussion that was happening on stage. And I thought that was so poignant about how the chatter online can often become so loud and all-consuming that what's actually going on in the real world doesn't matter at all.
And yeah, when the playwright created that scene, they had to make sure that it didn't matter. So this was Jonathan Spector was the playwright, because it was hard to focus on what was going on because the stuff on the screen was more interesting and more funny.
I read a really funny interview that was in the New York Times about the play, where one of the original actress who was playing Susan, was like, "I think the audience is going to think my argument is really flimsy during this part." And Jonathan Spector, the playwright, quipped back, he's like, "I don't think they're going to be listening to what you're saying. They're going to be laughing too hard." And the actress was like, "Wow, that's a pretty conceited thing to say. You must think you're hot shit." And then the previews start, and the audience just is laughing the entire scene. And gotta say, that was very true at Curious Theater as well.
Right. Yeah, this is something that we've, of course, seen in recent years. Just as you know, I think uh, Evan Hansen was a really good example of using the projected online chatter to great effect. And I can't think about this, but this one was really well done. I think we'll certainly see a lot more of it.
Yeah, you see it like I remember in Mean Girls, the
Right.
updated musical
The
that
burn
Tina Fey
book.
did. They have the burn book, and that's shown on screen. There's some text message exchanges that play out on that, but it's not quite as integrated as this. There are hundreds of cues and messages that appear on the screen during this one sequence, which I really just kudos to the entire team for. It really is. You have to be right on your cues with that scene because it is
You've
so
got to
fast
react
and
to what's going on the
true.
screen. Yeah, which I think they were
Absolutely.
all just looking at a laptop screen for their reactions.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
because Eric Sandoval is at the center of this, just like, and his reactions at that while all the messages are coming on the laptop screen really just sell the whole thing. Because as the argument is kind of continuing around him, his face is just in shock at some of the appalling things and personal attacks that parents are slinging at each other in the comments section.
right. And some of it was just mundane stuff that people like, oh, I think it was, a different country or whatever, just correcting each other, just little nitpicky things that people do and those kinds of things.
Although I think
But
my
yeah,
favorite thing was the person who kept sending the thumbs up
uh
emoji.
huh. Yes, that was very, very evocative of that kind of person. And then it wasn't until someone said something really outrageous that she gave the little,
The
oh my God,
gasping.
the
Yeah.
gasping emoji, whatever that's called. Yeah. So anyway, so that's a fun show. It's pretty funny. It does, I think it does um, sag a little bit in places. I think you pointed out in your review that the sarcasm or the kind of the satire loses a little steam after a while, and maybe there wasn't quite enough meat on the bone of the whole story to bring it home. But overall, I liked it.
Yeah, it was fun. I just felt that the by the time we got to the ending, um, which I guess I spoil in my review, but so I guess I can talk about it here. It's the kind of the conservative figure is exiled from this executive committee. They change the rules to kick them out so that they don't actually have to grapple with her ideas in the
Mhm.
school anymore. And in a time when we're just so consumed, you can't really do that in 2025. You can't just be like, I'm just going to ignore that and pretend that it's not all going on and just like get them out of here. No, they're running our country. They're the ones in charge. It just feels that the satire is a little bit slightly dated already. And I know the play was written just a couple of years ago, but our politics is changing so quickly that it's just tricky to have the satire be universally resonant.
Yeah, yeah, we've switched from having people on the fringe being anti-vaxxers to having like the people at the very top of our government questioning and making real life decisions about whether people can access them and stuff. It's nuts.
Totally.
So anyway, so that's Eureka Day is playing through. Let's see, October 6th at the Curious Theater, and then another one I got out to see, The Thin Place, which you'd reviewed also, and this was you kind of raved about The Thin Place in your review. I wasn't as wild about it as you were.
Yeah, give
Um,
it to me. I'm so curious to hear.
well, I thought it was interesting, and of course, it did have great performances, and but I thought it sort of dragged in the middle a little bit. It wasn't always entirely clear to me, like who who was well. I mean, there's only four characters in it, but I was it took me a while to figure out who the guy was. Like, was he the other woman's husband or brother or whatever? And but anyway, I thought it was, and it was interesting. I was with my wife and another couple, and Jen and I were both kind of like, it was okay, and but Carrie, who was there, really really liked it. She thought it was just a wonderful, creepy show that she really enjoyed. So it really goes all over the place how you experience these things.
I can understand. I get the My girlfriend who I took also agreed that that kind of dinner scene in the middle in which all four characters, or I guess it's after a party or whatever, they're
Hmm.
over at this, and they're all kind of having wine together and talking. It can be that scene starts a little slow, I think, just well because you have to have that exposition. But I really enjoyed the interplay and exchange of ideas, and how the guy who is in there, he's a political consultant. You ultimately learn, and how magic, or the perceived magic of the seance person, is kind of exploited by those in political power. I thought was just a really interesting kind of additional layer to this very spooky, nuanced real world ghost story.
Yeah, yeah, it's definitely it's a very interesting play. It's not like a kind of spooky play that's going to scare the shit out of you. There's definitely some spooky stuff, but it's much more subtle, and in that respect is pretty interesting the way it's constructed. So that's playing through the 28th here. So one more weekend in Denver at the Savoy, and then it's moving to the Boulder uh, Dairy Center, October 3rd through 26th. And we talked a little bit about that last week and how you're looking forward to maybe seeing it there to see how that staging is going to be different.
Particularly those special effects, that
Yeah,
the special effect at the end, really.
right.
I'm curious to see how that is replicated, because I think I've got it figured. I've got a pretty good idea of how they did it now. I've been really thinking about it. I've like been mulling it over. And I think I've got it figured out, but I need to see it in another space to make sure, because I'm like,
Uh-huh.
so I won't say on
Okay.
here because I don't accidentally want to give anything away if I did figure it
Right.
out. But um,
Okay.
I've been reading some
Uh,
Reddit boards to try to get to the bottom of this.
oh, okay. All right. All right. Well, I'm glad to know you're on the case about that. So, you were out of town this weekend, so we didn't have a ton of shows to talk about. But moving on to the news, I noticed that American Theater Magazine came out with its annual list of the top 10 most produced plays of the 2025-2026 season, which is like, not even sure how they come up with the. Well, I mean, 2026 hasn't happened yet, so I'm not sure how they uh, do that, but it's always an interesting list to look at. So the number one play or musical, Come From Away, with 23 productions going on, and Eureka Day, which we were just talking about, number three with 14. So a lot of people are want to get that vaccine play. So maybe some other playwrights out there can start banging out some Tylenol material or whatever to
Oh my
tap
gosh.
in tap into the zeitgeist. And then Fat Ham, which is coming to, I think it's coming to the Fox, right? Royal Fox
That's right.
next season, I think in March. So that's another one I know it's been making the rounds. Frozen is obviously always a popular one. The Heart Sellers by Lloyd
Hmm.
Sue, which we had here. Was it last year in 2024?
I believe it was in 2024 down in the Springs.
Right, right.
Yeah.
And then a couple of classics like Little Women, the Kate Hamill version. Well, actually, this is like different versions. So there's several ones: Heather
Hmm.
Chrysler, Lauren Gunderson, Kate Hamill, and Alan Nee. There's all these ones. Jen Silverman's The Roommate, Dear Evan Hansen, we were just talking about, and the Ain't Misbehavin', which is like, wow, that's interesting to see that in the top 10.
Yeah, I wouldn't have expected that. I wonder if there are just a lot of regional theaters who are doing this musical. I mean, it's a great musical review, but it's kind of surprising to see it on the list.
Yeah. And then, but the only other one I didn't really recognize was in the number two slot, Primary Trust by Ebony Booth. Do you know anything about this play?
I cannot say that I had ever heard of it. No.
Yeah, so it's a play about a bookstore worker who's laid off from his job in a small New York town. and explores his journey of self-discovery and facing the world he's long avoided. So I don't know. Maybe
Hmm.
we'll see that in Colorado
Yeah.
sometime.
I mean, I guess, yeah, eventually, if it's one of the most produced plays around the country,
Yeah.
I'd hope to see it here soon. I thought it was interesting. Come From Away topped the list. I mean, it's, I guess, very feel good musical
Uh-huh.
about awful tragedy, which is something that we maybe all need right now. Um, I did a little bit of more digging. Here's how the American Theater cueled this list. It's from the 293 members of the theater communications group, plus a couple of other productions at commercial theaters. So in total, they were surveying 1,446 productions that have been announced for 2025, 2026.
Okay.
And as always, they note they don't include productions of A Christmas Carol, of which there will be 44
Or
in
Shakespeare, I
various
think, right?
adaptations. That is also, yes, no Christmas Carol. Actually, no, they don't say it. This year they don't make a note about Shakespeare, but
Oh, okay.
I wonder. Yeah, they don't note that they're excluding Shakespeare. So I suppose he could have been included, but it looks like the Bard didn't make the cut this year.
I can't imagine that, I don't know, Much Ado About Nothing or something like that was not in the top 10 there somewhere, but who knows?
Okay, here's the note. The American Theater responded to somebody in the comments section. Shakespeare plays are included in this list, but Shakespeare as the playwright himself is not included in the playwrights tally because he would top that list. So that's the other list that got released this week. So I guess we can move our conversation onto that one.
Yeah, yeah. Do we have any friends of the pod on this list?
Yeah, we got a couple. It's a couple of friends of the pod who made the list. Kate, our girl Kate Hamill, is on the list again at 7 with 13 productions of her plays happening around, as well as Sandy Rustin, who has also been on the podcast. She comes
Yeah,
in at 17 with 8 um, show of her shows in production, and then of course Laura Gunderson, as usual,
Queen
tops
Bee.
this list with 24 productions. And although she's not a friend of the pod yet, maybe she can be someday because Colorado produces a shit ton of her plays. And we did get to see her act earlier this year.
Yeah, we were at the Colorado New Play Festival in Steamboat Springs, and she was there. We didn't get a chance to talk to her. But as we talked about at the time, they didn't have a lot of opportunities to really mingle with the playwrights or even the actors. But she was there. We were in the same room where it happened. And then yeah, some real people that probably never leave the list, like August Wilson. Ken Ludwig, whose farces are just always, and then some classics like Ibsen, Arthur Miller, Tennessee Williams. So yeah, it's always interesting to see this list come out and see what people are producing.
And a lot of the top playwrights kind of correspond with the top plays. Like Ebony
Yeah,
Booth has 21 productions, and a lot of those are productions of Primary Trust. In fact, yeah, actually, all of them are productions of Primary Trust. Excuse me,
yeah,
because she has 20. Ebony Booth has 21 shows, plays produced, and all of those were Primary Trust. So
uh-huh.
yeah,
Wow. Well, that Colorado theater people, maybe that's one to take a look at. If everybody's doing it, must be good, right? Maybe not.
maybe not. I don't know. I don't know. I'm not sure about that one, Alex. I
You
got to
never
read the
know.
script first before I
That's
weigh
right.
in.
Yeah. So another story that came out was I thought it's a little bit related to this, but this was an article by Michael Paulson in the New York Times that just came out this Monday about the Broadway musical and how the whole business model appears to be in jeopardy. So he wrote,
Hmm.
none of the 18 commercial musicals that opened on Broadway last season have made a profit yet. Some still could, but several have been spectacular flameouts. The new musicals Tammy Faye, Boop, and Smash each cost at least $20 million to bring to the stage, and each was gone less than 4 months after opening, and all three lost their entire investment. So that's not good.
Yeah, that's what we call in the business a box office bomb.
Yeah. And so he points out that even some revivals of, well-loved classics like Cabaret, they had a revival of that. There was a revival of Gypsy with Audra McDonald. Sunset Boulevard, and none of those really none of them really made back their money.
Yeah, zoning in on that cabaret example, there's one of the investors, it's mentioned in the article, is actually suing the production because it's reportedly made roughly about $90 million overall throughout its run. And yet, and so person who invested is like, this is some bullshit. How is there no money being returned back to the investors? And the production's official response is, because we have no money. We've lost it all in running costs to keep the show operational, because there are just all of these hidden costs that are just a reoccur as long as the show is playing and operational. Like, you have to pay the electricity, you have to pay all of the actors' expenses each week that they're on, you have to pay the house that you're actually in. And so all of these things drive up the cost and make it so even if a show has made a lot of money, that doesn't mean it's made a profit.
Yeah. And also pointed out in this story was that only 3 new musicals have recouped their investment since the pandemic, and apparently, and some of these were actually did so because they got some government money from the Shuttered
Actually,
Venue Operator grants.
all 3 of these shows only were able to recoup their investment thanks to government assistance. And so the 3 shows are MJ, which is the jukebox musical about Michael Jackson, and Juliet, which just came through the Denver
Hmm.
Center. And then the final one is Six, which is the kind of one-act musical, pop musical that reimagines the lives of the ill-fated wives of King Henry VIII.
Right. As pop stars. So
As
so
pop
yeah,
stars,
so
that's right.
that's pretty interesting. Of course, federal it's funny to read about grants from the federal government for the arts right now. Of course that's all gone away because of who shall not be named and his cronies. So that's a lot of this stuff is gone, and so it doesn't bode well.
Yeah, and not only the federal programs have been ended, that's obvious. I mean, producers had to be expecting that with the change
Right.
of administration. But I think what's really hard is that the New York state programs, which have aided almost every single Broadway show to open over the last few years, will end this fall unless it's renewed by state lawmakers. Which, it kind of seems crazy that this is at all even open for debate in New York, given that the
Yeah.
central role that Broadway plays in tourism for the city, and yet it's not been approved. The extension to the state program to invest in these shows has not been approved yet.
Yeah. Any solutions out there for this dilemma?
Well, I thought it was interesting. In the article itself, it posited that plays, which have often been overshadowed by musicals on Broadway, are actually now faring better than them. So 7 plays that opened on Broadway last season were profitable, including big hits, include like the splashy production of Othello starring Jake Gyllenhaal and Denzel
Uh-huh.
Washington, and then the George Clooney show Good Night, whatever,
Uh-huh.
I don't remember what that show was called, but that was the one of the ones that was profitable, largely because it was a play with a short run, short fixed costs, meaning, and then it was able, because they're in smaller houses, it creates scarcity, which allows producers to be able to inflate the ticket prices. I mean, we talked about this on the podcast when Othello was running and breaking box office records, that it was only able to do that because tickets were hundreds, if not thousands of dollars for one single ticket. And so that's a solution, but it's not exactly an accessible solution. And the article makes the argument that the industry can't live on plays alone, particularly plays in limited short runs that feature celebrities, because that means you're going to just be killing the working actors in the city who rely on musicals and long-term gigs like Wicked running for years to be able
Right.
to make their living.
That's your job. Wicked. It's my job.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, right on the heels of this story, the OnStage blog published a story called "that Broadway's financial crisis needs structural fixes, not hand wringing." So, what does this one dive into?
So it kind of talks about how it kind of critiques the article a little bit for just being like, oh no, it's not profitable on Broadway anymore, rather than suggesting serious reforms to kind of adjust how shows are produced. So one of those points was talking about those theater owner deals that I mentioned earlier as one of the costs that musicals and
Huge
plays
cost.
have to mount. It's massive. And so right now, this financial arrangement between producers and theater owners is lopsided. Owners either charge rent that is sky high or they take a cut of the weekly gross, sometimes both. And so, for a show that's already spending millions just to keep the lights on, that extra bite makes survival nearly impossible once the early buzz wears off. So, that's how, like a show like Cabaret, which is raking in a sizable amount of in the box office every single week, is still not profitable because they're having to give so much of that money away to basically a greedy landlord.
Yeah, I remember when I was listening to that Freakonomics podcast earlier this year, where they were talking about the 3 Summers of Lincoln. They talked about and actually talked to some of the producers. I don't know if they ever talked to one of the theater owners, but they're basically the bulk of the theaters in the official Broadway district are controlled by like only 3 companies, and they're really really grasping. Greedy, greedy companies that are not, given much help to the theaters that are trying to produce plays, and even if the plays didn't do well, they're still getting their cut, right?
That is correct. It's I guess it's just a little bit easier with plays though when you're charging so much more you're so much more money for these like celebrity productions. Like
Yeah.
Art that's currently up right now that features 3 celebrities in it. They're able to charge a premium in a smaller theater, jack up the prices. Maybe they'll probably recoup.
So the second point that the Onstage blog made was the ending the myth of the open run. So they're calling, the idea a sacred cow that Broadway believes every new musical is supposed to run forever. They say limited runs are the smarter play. 12 or 16 weeks feels doable for big name talent. It creates urgency for audience and keeps budgets realistic. Of course, that goes against what you were just talking about, how actors depend on some of those long shows to just, but it just, I guess they're saying actors are going to, anybody working on these shows just needs to hustle more to keep jobs coming in.
It's a fair point. A lot of productions you now see are not they don't necessarily even start on Broadway. Broadway is just one stop on the tour for them. For instance, the recent production of The Wiz, which you and I were not fans of, but it was profitable, and its model was do a national tour, have a stop for a time in New York, build some hype, make money there, then leave, go back out on tour, make money in the rest of the country. I think that could also be a part of this model that the author is suggesting is like you've got maybe instead of just relying on New York audiences or tourists who come to New York, you've got to be thinking about the entire country slash the entire world when you're doing these things. Especially if you know they're going to be expensive.
Yeah, for sure. I wonder if that would make the theater owners themselves have to be a little more competitive if they weren't going to be expecting plays to stay there for that long, and they've got to attract companies that are kind of just coming through.
That's actually a really good point too. That would definitely give the producers of these shows a little bit more leverage because they're like, no, you know what? I can make more money at XYZ regional theater where I don't have to pay an arm and a leg to put my thing up. They want me to come here. They need me to give to their subscribers in the area. So if you can't make it work, I'm not coming to your theater.
Yeah. Yeah, put the screws to them, make them beg a
Absolutely.
little bit. So, and then the third point they made in Onstage blog was that streaming is not the enemy. That people are afraid that if you stream a show, that it's going to cannibalize the live ticket sales. But they're saying that these ticket prices are already insane, and there's all this millions and millions of dollars of capitalization that goes into it. That maybe it's just time to try and gain more revenue from streaming, which I'm not sure how much that there's been a few successful. It's really expensive to photo, just to shoot a play or musical and do it well. But I don't know. Maybe people will get more into it. I don't know.
I think it's just something you've got to invest in. Like when you see something like Hamilton, that it was on Broadway, very successful. They shot a pro shot version of it
Yeah,
that released on Disney Plus during the pandemic.
it was
It
great.
it didn't affect its box office at all. It's still running. In fact, now that Leslie Odom Jr. is back in the Hamilton cast in New
Yeah.
York, the show is actually making record amounts of money, so even more money. And this is also in the same year that the film version of Hamilton went into theaters, into movie theaters for 2 weeks. And it
Hmm.
was able to gross in its opening weekend $10 million. And it was playing in less than 2,000 theaters around the country. That's small. Typical wide release for a major motion picture is roughly 4,000 theaters. So there is demand for the filmed versions of these plays, even if they are still running in New York, as evidenced by Hamilton. So I just don't understand where the logic for producers comes in that they're like, the line of defense has always been that will cut into our profits. People won't go see it live if they can view it at home. And I just don't think that's true.
Yeah,
I mean, the
lots of
numbers
people
don't
have.
support that.
Yeah, I mean, lots of people have no plans or the resources to go see live theater in New York City. Um, and and unless it comes through, like a place like Denver as a touring production, or a local theater does it. But if you want to see, something that's hot, I don't know what a good example is right now. But it's I'm not going to go spend 3 days in New York City seeing plays. I can't afford to do that, and probably most people can't.
I certainly cannot. However, if there are any producers in New York City who want to pay for me to come out to the city to take in their plays, I'm happy to do that. But
Yeah.
until then, I certainly don't. Yeah, I'm like I don't have that kind of eggs nest set aside just go on a spending spree up in New York, particularly as we're saying the New York Times article about this situation. In the piece, it mentioned that these shows are losing money at the same time that ticket prices are higher than they've ever been.
Yep.
And yet it's just not matching. Like, even
Yeah.
still, the author actually makes the argument that ticket prices should be higher, which I think is just kind of crazy to even conceive.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know if this is a great comparison, but it reminds me of like restaurants. Restaurants are always saying it's so expensive for us to be in business, and most restaurants fail. And it's like, but you go in a restaurant right now, it's like, holy shit. I mean, even like a fast food place or a fast casual, it's like, you go in there with just a couple of people, and you're just dropping $75, for lunch or dinner. And it's a business model thing that's just not working, and it seems like that's what's happening with these Broadway shows. And I worry that, like, if there's not a stream of new shows, we'll be destined to watch The Music Man and shows like forever and ever and ever without new stuff coming through.
I mean, God, I hope not. But I if we don't figure out a solution for producing new works, then that is financially viable, then I think that is the future that awaits us. However, I'm not I'm not giving up hope just yet. I'm not
No, don't
totally
give up.
defeated because I do really think that there's a lot of interesting work happening in the regional theater scenes, and like I think maybe that's the model. Rather than trying to put your work immediately in New York and just like we have to go to New York in order to make it work, that's not true in our day and age anymore, in which you can film whatever you're doing, put it online wherever you're doing it, build buzz organically. And like we're seeing that here in Denver with a lot of new shows. Like, let's just take The Legend of Anne Bonny, a new show produced by Shifted Lens and Two Cent Theater, which I hope has legs and continues to have productions around the country. But it started here, built buzz online. They have a pretty big TikTok following now because people were able to watch the production be built behind the scenes. They feel like it's theirs. I imagine if they were to launch a Kickstarter campaign or something to do crowdfunding at this point, they would have built that audience organically. So I think producers in this day and age just have to be a little bit more strategic and not see Broadway as the end all be all, or as a place where you have to start in order to build your show.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, obviously, if this thing's not working, where everything's got to be on Broadway, and uh, to have a life, that you got to look at other ways to do it, and that means probably off Broadway. And that's just the
That's
way
right.
it's going to have to be. So, what else? I think we have some news a little more local.
That's right. So finally, last week on the show, we talked about Evergreen's production of Annie Get Your Gun and how the Ovation West Theater Company was responding to the tragic school shooting that occurred in the town earlier this month. In the wake of the tragedy at Evergreen High School, the company decided to temporarily pause the production and noted that it would make a decision on how to proceed in the coming days. Um, Late in the evening on Tuesday, September 16th, the company shared on Facebook that after consulting with community members, students, parents, therapists, and other industry professionals, that the show would go on.
Right. And they made some changes. They eliminated any sound effects that might resemble gunfire. And then this is an interesting one, and I'm not sure what they did here. They replaced all the firearm props with non-threatening objects that still allow the cast to tell the story. So we were joking, like using bananas or sticks or what. Yeah, I don't know what they did. And then they had some help from mental health professionals to be around in case anybody needed help.
Yeah. I think those were all very smart choices, and it allowed the Ovation West Performing Arts Company to continue the show. They're not going to be defeated in the wake of this tragedy. Um, they're continuing to do art and helping people, as they say, quote, respond with empathy, understanding, and connection. So I just thought that was a really mature response. I'm glad that the show didn't ultimately get canceled, even though and I'm also glad that they made some adjustments so that people weren't going to be re-traumatized. And they also shared that if there were community members who felt that this was just too much, they didn't want to see the show right now, that they were willing to offer a full refund with no questions asked.
Right. Yeah, I thought it was a smart decision. Honestly, I thought they would cancel, and I was glad to see that they didn't because sometimes just you can't react to everything all the time with just canceling stuff because stuff is going to happen. So the other thing that was interesting is they changed the name of the show from Annie Get Your Gun to Annie Get Your Man, which I wasn't sure if you're even allowed to do that, but I don't know.
I wasn't sure about that one either. I wondered when you texted me the news if they had reached out to the publishers to get this change approved, but I I imagine even if they heard about this, they would understand given the circumstances.
Yeah, it's an old enough show that I can't imagine too many people going to come out of the woodwork protesting that kind of a thing.
Maybe next week we'll be reporting on the Annie Get Your Gun purists who staged a boycott outside Evergreen's production.
That's right. Yeah. All right. Well, now we're just going to take a quick break, and we'll be back with our interview with Jason Ducat to talk sound design. So stick around. We'll be right back. OnStage Colorado is brought to you by the Aurora Fox Arts Center, presenting Schoolhouse Rock Live, September 19th through October 18th. Relive the magic of Saturday mornings following Tom, a nervous young teacher, as characters on his TV spring to life and show him how to inspire his students through imagination and music. Tickets at aurorafoxartscenter.org. OnStage Colorado is sponsored in part by Colorado Candlelight, featuring Steel Magnolias, September 11th through November 9th. In a small Louisiana beauty salon, 6 women share humor, love, and strength in a play that blends heartwarming comedy with moments of poignant emotion. Tickets at coloradocandlelight.com. We're also supported by the Boulder Ensemble Theater Company, whose production of The Thin Place plays September 12th through 28th at the Denver Savoy and at the Boulder Dairy Center October 3rd through 26th. Lucas Nath's play is the story of a teenage girl who claims she can communicate with the dead and brings a recently deceased woman back to life during a church service. Tickets at betc.org. And we're also supported by Denver's Curious Theater, presenting Eureka Day by Jonathan Spector, September 4th through October 5th. This timely story is about parents at a progressive private school who face a crisis when a mumps outbreak occurs and they must confront their beliefs about vaccination. Tickets at curioustheater.org. OnStage Colorado is brought to you by Littleton Town Hall, whose production of Buddy, the Buddy Holly story, runs September 12th through October 19th. From his meteoric rise to fame to his legendary final performance, this musical features all of Buddy's greatest hits. Tickets at townhallartscenter.org. Also supporting OnStage Colorado is the Colorado Springs Fine Arts Center at Colorado College, presenting Miss Holmes and Miss Watson September 18th through October 5th. Oddball female roommates Sherlock Holmes and Joan Watson join forces and emerge from the COVID pandemic fog as a deeply codependent, quasi dysfunctional odd couple adventure duo. Tickets at fac.coloradocollege.edu. All right, today we are here with Jason Ducat, sound designer, and thanks a lot for being on the OnStage Colorado podcast, Jason.
Oh, well, thank you for having me.
Yeah, so we ran into each other at the Henry Awards. We were talking to Brian Landis Fulkins, and he introduced us, and was like, "Wow, we got to get you on the show to talk about sound." So here we are.
No, it's great. It's great. I definitely you'd love to talk about sound, and I've never actually had a sort of podcast interview before. So
let's talk about how you got started.
So I kind of wanted to do something in theater for a while, since I was probably in high school. And I started taking, drama classes. And at that point, I thought I was going to be an actor, a nice, famous actor making millions of dollars on doing movies.
And where was that, Jason? Where'd you grow up?
I grew up in Ohio, in Bowling Green, Ohio.
Okay.
And, started taking drama classes and realized I actually really hate being up on stage. Didn't enjoy it. And so I started doing backstage work. And the teacher that we had at our school, she did some work at the university there, Bowling Green State University. And she would take some students there to get some experience, work backstage. And at that point, I got put doing the follow spot for some shows there. And I guess they liked sort of what I did and said, you should consider a career in this somewhere. I said, great. That's awesome. I enjoy doing it. They had me in there like doing hang and focus for lights. And I originally thought I was going to be a lighting designer. That was sort of the path I was going to take. And that's what I went to undergrad for.
Oh, wow.
Was to be a lighting designer. While I was there, at my school, they actually had a recording studio below our building. It was part of the music department. And I had a little bit of a musical background. I wasn't great, but I played guitar and I played saxophone. And when I learned that, I was like, oh, hey, that's cool. I kind of like to learn how to do some of that stuff. Never done it before. And I started taking the classes. And because the program that I had, I was at the University of South Florida, they didn't really have a sound program. I kind of had some sound classes. So they kind of looked at people that maybe had some experience with sound to do their sound designs. And so eventually they pulled me aside and asked, hey, would you like to do a sound design for a show? And I was like, sure, why not? I'll try it. Seemed interesting. I definitely liked playing around with sound and music and doing all that stuff. Although I'm sure those first sound designs that I did were absolutely horrible, going back and listening to them too now. But once I started, I think my first sound design for them, I kind of got hooked with doing it. I like I said, I did have a little bit of background in music. I really, I think a lot in my life, I sort of thought of things or remembered things, or, through maybe the sounds that I remember. Different parts of my life. Of course, I remember through different songs that maybe I liked at that time. So it kind of drew me to it, to bring that sort of element and of storytelling to theater. And I just got hooked on that. And I think ever since I did my first sound design, which was probably about, I think my sophomore, junior year, I kind of never looked back and focused on sound for from then up forward.
That's great. Well, you definitely have an impressive resume. So some of your recent ones, Dracula and Noises Off at the Arvada Center, Elephant and Piggy at the Denver Center, Coal Country and Grounded at Betsy, Mousetrap at Lone Tree, The Minute to Curious Theater Company. So lots of big shows lately. So I just wanted to ask you, like, when you're approaching a show, what's your process from like that first script read to opening night? How do you decide what's important and and how you're going to shape the sound of the show.
Yeah. So, I mean, I kind of go through the script a few times. A lot of times it's just sort of getting the idea of the story and the characters, kind of talking to the director and seeing what their vision is. And then I kind of just go in and start feeling about, what's sort of the emotion of this play. What are those emotions that I can help bring out through either soundscapes or sound design or music or whatever. And I kind of start hearing, different sounds and musics or different types of music. And I think, kind of going, okay, this might work, or I might have something might pop into my head, like an instrument that I like. Oh, I really like how this tone would sound with this piece. And I kind of go through just sort of the story. I also kind of go through some of the preliminary ideas of the other designs, like the set design, maybe some of the costume pieces. I kind of know who the actors are, and how they're, what their voices are, maybe what they're going to bring. And I try to kind of fit whatever I'm putting in, sound or music, to those, and almost make it, you know, make the storytelling a little bit, maybe a little bit more dense by adding that sound, that another layer of the design element in there. And I've kind of figure out how can sound help this scene, or do we need sound?
Right.
I think it's just an important to think, hey, maybe I can step back here a little bit. And I don't necessarily need to be there, and we can just let what's going on stage kind of help tell the story. But, I think sound, I mean, it can help, bring the emotion out of the scene. I think it can kind of be a part of the characters, that are on scene, kind of like almost a part of them. It's emanating from them. I think it can be a part of, the natural world around us to try to help create that, how realistic I want to go or how maybe abstract I want to go with the sound. And just figure out how that all sort of fits in with the world of play and where we're going. So I think that's at least starting off. And then once we get into rehearsals, I like to play around with the sound, see how it all fits in with everything else. Because I want everything, obviously to kind of mesh with kind of weave in to everything else that's going in. So I want the sound to be able to match what the visuals, what people are saying. So, a lot of times I'll think about colors, what colors are on stage, so maybe what colors that represents in the oral environment. So maybe certain instruments invoke certain colors in me or certain sounds, effects. So to kind of have that matching and bring a little bit more life, to the world through the sound design. Yeah. So that's kind of what I'm, all my processes that I go through when I get a script and start a show.
Yeah, that's interesting what you were saying about places where maybe you don't need sound there, and I tend to notice sound design if it's particularly. I think a lot of times probably the best sound design is when you don't necessarily notice. And the times where I've been like, oh God, why did they have to have the birds chirping that entire scene, or something like that? And it's particularly egregious in podcasts, I will say. There's a lot of podcasts I listen to, I'm like, oh my God, stop doing like a wacky clown sound between, whatever. So I also wanted to talk to you about technology. So, you're old enough to have probably seen some pretty, dramatic changes with digital systems, wireless technology, and the software. And how has that changed all the creative possibilities? And it made it easier or just more challenging?
I mean, I think, we can do so much more. And, it can be, it's challenging at times because of course you have to learn new equipment, new software. and things like that. But I think it's opened up so much of us, for that we're able to do as sound designers. And we can do it maybe now even faster than, I mean, even though I was sort of at the tail end of it, I did do in school, I did some tape reel to reel. And that took a lot of time to get it right. And if you screwed up, you might not be, there was no, undo,
Right.
you couldn't go back, a lot of times. So, it's made it easier in that, to be able to create things. We have more at our fingertips, I think, that we can do, especially, with laptops and, different digital audio workstations, samples, virtual instruments. We can have like a whole symphony on a hard drive,
right,
that we can kind of create from. There's all kinds of, sound effects libraries, or of course we have all this recording equipment that we can go out and record our own stuff. And I think also within the space itself, we can, sort of encompass the whole space with sort of how surround sound and object-based mixing technology. We can, if you've ever been to a movie theater that has Dolby Atmos, where the kind of sound is able to kind of move all around, and not only on the horizontal plane, but also vertically above you. You can have all those, options now. I've done many shows. Dracula was probably the last one. But even going back to, I worked on Tommy at the Denver Center, where, we were able to take the sounds, and because of, basically this object-based mixing is, kind of easily move the sound through the space. And I think in a way, it's more representative, how we hear. We can hear sort of all around us and above us, and
right.
It's just not located, to the front of us to the stage. We can move it around. So I think it gives us a more immersive experience that maybe we could get, before, but it took a lot. It took a lot of time, trial and error. And there's still some trial and error now, but it's a lot easier to kind of get those effects.
So I guess there obviously there has to be a huge difference between doing a play and a musical. And how do you work with, like, I don't know, the music director or live band, things like that? What are some of the extra challenges you have there?
I mean, when I'm thinking about a play, a lot of the times, obviously you're working within the parameters of the play. But a lot of times, I'm able to kind of think, okay, here's the music that I want to create or find. And I kind of have a little bit more control that way, as far as that goes. And with the music, you already have the composer, whoever that might be, that created the music, and that's all there. And you're more trying to get that, you're finding the mics, setting up the speakers. So, you're translating what they already have. And so, it's working with whoever the musical director is and seeing, hey, what is the sound you're looking for? How do you want that to come out to the audience? What can I do, either through the space, where speaker placement, mics choice, whatever mics that I use, where am I going to put the mics on the actors? Is it going to be, kind of farther away, or do I want it closer? Do they care about that aesthetics of actually seeing it or mic, or do they want like a more natural sound? So maybe obviously they're going to know that it's mic'd, but maybe it doesn't always have to sound like it's, being really, really, mic'd. It's not like a
Right.
rock and roll show. We want it to be as natural as possible. So
I would guess the holy grail of sound design technology would be to not have a mic taped to their face.
Yeah.
But how do you do that? Who knows?
Yeah, and I mean, sometimes it's completely fine. Having it closer, if we're not trying to make the illusion that this isn't mic'd, and we're kind of putting it out there like it is, you'll see a lot of shows now. They'll kind of have those little boom mics that kind of come a little bit more closer.
Right.
And we're not trying to hide that we're miking. And that gives us a little bit more gain that we can get once, the closer we get to their mouths. So I think it's just, figuring out what they want to do, what that sound that they're looking for. I'm doing Lady Day at the Arvada Center.
Oh, great.
I think
we were just talking about that yesterday with Brian.
Yeah, with Brian. Yeah.
Yeah.
It opens at the end of September. And, so, it is, we've kind of been in conversations about, so how do we want this to sound? It's in a club, small blues club,
right,
in Philadelphia. What's that sound like?
Yeah.
And is it realistic, or do we sometimes want to make it bigger? Yeah. Or maybe even make that a little bit smaller, which we've kind of talked about as well, how we want that, music to play in the space.
Mm-hmm. One of the other things that people will notice is like kind of like the disastrous sound thing where the actor's mic goes out.
Mm-hmm.
That's not really your department, is it? That's more like the stage management crew that's in charge of those.
Kind of, yeah. Yeah. I mean, especially once the show is in the run, I'm not really around. And yeah, you're occasionally going to have the occasional mistakes here and there. I think as a sound designer, you try to, think of the best ways, and make it easier for whoever's mixing, or, playing back the show that, they're comfortable and they can do it, not too problematic. So I think, how the setup is, how they're comfortable with mixing. I let my mixers, a lot of times I say, hey, you're the one that's going to be running this board when I'm gone. So if you have ideas on how you want it set up so it's easier for you to mix, let me know, just so it makes it easier for them once they get going. But, occasionally mics go out, they might miss a pickup here and there. And this just happens. Not much I can do about that.
Sure.
Mm-hmm.
So I was thinking about, of course, Colorado's theater scene has, little community theaters and, the bigger spaces. I mean, think about like trying to do sound in the curious theater company space versus like a modern facility like the Lone Tree or something like that. How do how do you approach those, big disparity between the kind of spaces that you're designing for?
When do it? I mean, it's sort of, I kind of think of what I can do. I know obviously you're going to have, places that have more money than others. You can maybe have a little bit more toys that you can play with. But I try to think of, what's the best I can do with what I have at that space. So, some places, maybe I can't get as a full immersive sound, that maybe I would like, but I try to do what I can. Maybe it's a couple speakers, on the sides or in the rear. I think sometimes like a place like Curious is kind of nice because it is a little bit more intimate.
Mm-hmm.
So I think it's easier to sometimes bring the audience in. Even though you might not have, all the big, huge equipment, and speakers and line arrays and stuff like that you might have at other places. But you also don't necessarily need that, because the space is a little bit more, it's smaller and intimate,
right?
So I might not, having those big, huge speakers might be overkill for that space. but yeah, it's going, okay, here's what I would like to do. Here's what I would like the sound to do. And then I think, okay, how can I make that happen in this space? And what can I do with what they have available?
Right.
And I try the best I can,
Yeah. I always like to ask, people in the back in those technical roles for advice that they might give to some poor guy who's in a small community theater and told, "You do the sound. You played guitar once, right?" or something
Yeah.
like that.
Yeah,
What are some things you would tell them to start out when it doesn't involve like going to school for 3 years or something?
Yeah. Yeah. It's funny. There's a lot of sound people that are just that, they played a guitar or something and all of a sudden they got thrown into a sound design. There's, I think I tell them, if they're not in, if school or anything like that isn't an option, I kind of say, hey, look at other shows, see some bigger shows, if you can, and see how sound is integrated into those, those shows. And I kind of think, I tell them, we all, listen, to the world around you. Be aware of, how you perceive sound. I know a lot of us, since we're visual people, we don't kind of think about it a lot. It just happens, but it affects us in a lot of different ways. And so a lot of times I'm like, just go out, your every day and figure out how the sound is affecting you. Just walking down the street or watching TV or going to a restaurant. How does music affect you? When you listen to different type of music. And then with that in mind, when you go into a show, and you're thinking, hey, this is what I want the sound to do, you'll have those kind of ideas of, hey, this is how sound affects us, so now I can sort of, based on that, I can go, okay, how can I make that happen with the sounds that I'm, choosing? So, I always say, like, everything is sort of musical in some ways, and everything, especially sound wise, has this certain emotion attached to it. So, like you said earlier about the birds chirping, we just hear birds chirping.
Mm-hmm.
And yes, that can be very distracting just by itself, if it doesn't need to be there. But if it's telling part of a story, like a nice happy bird chirping could be like a happy moment,
Sure.
that you're hearing.
Yeah.
But if you take those birds and maybe you make them, I don't know, crows,
Yeah.
all of a sudden that's telling a whole different story.
Yeah.
And how big they are, how small they are. Is it one crow? Is it two crows? Is it a whole, gang of crows? Or was it
A
murder
yes.
of crows? Yeah. How does that sort of play into the scene now? And what kind of emotion does that bring into it? Or somebody knocking on a door, is it just a simple knock, or is it somebody pounding? You know, it, nothing is there. Nothing's, not there to have some intent, when you're thinking about sound design. There is got to be some attention to it. So, I always tell them, just, listen more, know how sound is going to affect people, and know how, when you're thinking about that show and thinking about how you want the sound, think about the effect you want to have on the audience,
Sure.
that sound's going to have. Yeah. And so, and, there's a lot of other things, of course there's, now with all the ways we can kind of are connected, you can always, there's, actually a group of sound designers and composers. It's called TSDCA. That just sound designers all over the U.S. That you can join. And I always say, don't just listen to me. reach out to other people and, find out what they do. And, that's a good resource to go into. I find that usually sound designers are pretty open, to questions. And, so if you usually reached out, a lot of times they'll get back to you. And so find out what everybody's, as many people as you can, just kind of say, kind of dive right in and see as much as you can, figure out, get as much information as you can, kind of take everything as like a learning moment, as you go. You're going to make mistakes. It's going to happen. Just take everything as a learning experience.
All right. Well, that's sound advice. Pun intended.
There you go.
All right. Well, Jason Ducat, thanks so much for being on. Your next show that you're doing sound design for is Lady Days at Emerson's Bar and Grill at the Arvada Center. And this is coming up in September, late September through November. So this is a Billie Holiday biopic set in a seedy bar. So that's what you're busy working on now, right?
Yeah. I have that. And actually, I do have one right before that at Curious Theater. That'll be Eureka Day.
Oh, okay.
And that starts, I think it opens around September. I think it's 6th. If I'm not mistaken, that sounds about right. So that'll actually come first, and then Lady Day. And then I am remounting Goodnight Moon at Denver Center, which that opens, I think, late October.
Yeah, that's a fun one.
Yeah, it's a great one. It's fun.
So that with my granddaughters a while back, and now they're too old. So
yeah, I know. Well, it's funny. I have 3 kids, and they saw that when it first came out. And I think the boys were like 5 years old, and my daughter was just born. And my wife, she was a stage manager, and so my youngest, my daughter, she actually spent a whole lot of time in the rehearsal process for that. And I think actually watched one of the performances when I think she was probably only about 2-3 months old. So now she'll actually get to see it and actually remember seeing it. So yeah, it's awesome.
That's great. All right. Well, Jason, thanks again for coming on and sharing your wisdom about sound design. We really appreciate it. And best of luck breaking legs and all that for your next couple of shows.
No, great. Thank you. I appreciate and liked being on. So thank you.
Well, thank you so much to Jason for coming on the OnStage Colorado podcast to chat with us a little bit about his work. Really interesting, prolific guy.
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, he just did the sound for a show we were just talking about, which was Eureka Day.
Well, that brings us to the end of our show for this week. Alex, what's up next on the pod?
I have no idea. I was talking with Heidi at the Denver Center about maybe having one of the actors from the upcoming Broadway touring show Shucked, who is a Colorado person. So I'm waiting to hear back from her. So we might have an interview with that person, and then who knows what else we'll talk about. But we'll be back next week with some kind of topic, as well as our Colorado headliners shows that are coming up that you want to check out. We'll also have reviews on the site right now. Include Tony's review of Eureka Day at Curious. We'll have one from Theater Works in Colorado Springs is doing a production of Cabaret. So I think April was going to check that one out. And of course, we've got some of the other latest shows on the site that we've been covering a lot of stuff lately.
Yeah, and I'm going to see 3 shows this weekend, so I'll have reviews of that after I see them this weekend. I'll be out at the DCPA's production of The Happiest Man on Earth, Lady Day at Emerson's Bar over at the Arvada Center, and then Alabama Story at Firehouse Theater in Denver. So 3 shows, all plays, although I think Lady Day is a little bit, it has some music in it, but I'll be curious to see those and report back.
Absolutely. All right. Well, that's all for this week. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Alex Miller.
And I'm Tony Tresca, and we'll see you at the show.